Welcome into the Hot Read podcast live here in Indianapolis, Indiana for the NFL Combine on a wonderful and beautiful, might I add, in Indianapolis today, Tuesday, February the 25th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, writer and reporter here at 440 Sports Podcast Network. You can follow me on Twitter at JT_Ruhnke, and holding us down or I guess back in Nashville, I should say, is none other than my co-host, Stoney, Keeley, editor-in-chief of So Bros Network and co-writer over at Stacking the Inbox. Stoney, how is Nashville? Is it's still all there, correct?
It's still here.
Nashville's
yeah.
still there? Okay.
It is still here. Yeah, it is beautiful outside today. I think it got up to like near 70. The sun shines out. I don't know. I haven't left the house. I've barely left my office today, but from what I hear, it's a beautiful day out there today.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Our travel arrangements this year for the Combine, and specifically our lodging, is a lot different than any other year. Like last year, I was about 1.5 miles away, and it was freezing cold, and I had to walk every single day to the Combine Convention Center. This year, we are actually in a building that is connected like through like 4 different skyways to the convention center. So technically, beautiful. I never have to step outside if I don't want to. That being said, I did because it's Combine week, and you got to make do. Like farm boys make do. And this week I am a farm boy. I've had 2 cups of coffee, a bottle of water, and I had to go find something to eat right before the show. So I found a donut shop, and I've had a donut today. So I had to go outside. That's all I've had today. That's what the Combine does to me. But I think I have a new strategy here, Stoney, and it's called 6:30 p.m. naps. Is going to be my go-to because we know the Combine, right? It's about the prospects, but it's also about the crazy cast of characters you see out in the nightlife late at night, like late at night. Like you really don't see people go out to the bars and start hanging out until about like 9:30, 10 o'clock. And that sometimes is even early. So I think what I've decided to do this year is that I am going to take naps at 6:30 at night. Wake up around like 7:30, 8-ish, go get some dinner and then be ready to go. And that way I'm getting some more sleep in. But that's what we're doing this week here at the Combine. That's what the first overall pick does, because it has been a whirlwind of a day. And we have so many clips to play show and tell with you here today. Reminder, if you're joining us in the 440 Sports YouTube section here, like Jake, where he says, lie to me like Brian Callahan. Z Dean saying lying season like the show's start time. Listen, it's a long day. I have so many things to do. Eddie saying JT eating like I did during college finals week. So fair. Reminder, if you want to join people like Jake, Z Dean, and Eddie in the comment section, head on over to the 440 Sports YouTube channel where you can join them and get in on the conversation, because it's going to be an interesting one today. We heard a lot of different things from Mike Borgonzi, Brian Callahan, about the first overall pick, about quarterbacks, about Travis Hunter. A lot of good information that I, for one, Stoney, am so excited to dive into. But before we do that, have to give a special shout out to our sponsors, ML Rose Craft Beer and Burgers, 7 locations in the greater Nashville area. We thank them for sponsoring the show and bringing the Hot Read podcast to you all free of charge every single week, and including every single day this week that we are at the Combine. Stone, we got to start off with a little bit of a sponsorship ML Rose Combine crossover, because you had a tweet earlier today in the season of lying season, in honor. First of all, Brian Callahan's face in this picture is like the Grinch when he smiles in How the Grinch Stole Christmas, but also like I love it. Me when my wife asks if I want to go to ML Rose for date night, I can't think of a better reaction than that when someone
That's the
asks
face
me
I
if I
maced.
want to go to ML Rose, and it's so easy to see why. Just an absolutely insane selection of beers on tap and their menu to boot. Thank you to ML Rose for sponsoring the show, as well as Sinker's Beverages for all of your liquor, wine, and spirits needs. Head on over to Sinker's Beverages in East Nashville for that. All right, we can get into the show, but not before Team Ramrod with just an all-time question or comment here saying, I just ate an entire large pizza by myself. I'm playing hurt today on the Hot Read podcast chat. We love to see it. And then Paul asking the question that everybody wants to know. Who are we drafting? I think that's a great place to start because my main takeaway from Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi's media availability today is that I don't think they know. I like it is not certain right now who they're taking. If you had to ask me right now after that press conference today, I would say that I think we heard so much about quarterbacks that they aren't made up on their mind about quarterback. I don't think they've made up their mind on Travis Hunter. Abdul Carter maybe a little bit more, but all in all, like this is still a very wide open. Like there are so many different possibilities that they can take right now, and we heard a lot about every single different prospect that they could potentially do trade back. You know, all these guys. Stoney, is that kind of how it felt to you as well? Do you think you had any sense of a clear direction that they were going in terms of who they will draft at the 101?
Yeah, I think the way I would frame it is that it feels like they're certainly leaving their options open and they are approaching this process with an open mind. Obviously, the need at quarterback is great, but are either of these quarterbacks truly worthy of the first overall pick from a talent standpoint? There does seem to be a disparity between these quarterbacks and like the blue chip guys at the top of the draft, like Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. So I don't know. There might be a little gamesmanship going on, like the tweet we showed where Paul was kind of asking how difficult it would be for Brian Callahan to lie to other people. Capable, is he capable of lying directly to other coaches and GMs? Oh yeah. I think there's a little bit of gamesmanship going on here. I think it's also there's a little bit of common sense here, right? I don't feel like the pool of available candidates at 1 overall is so wide that we have to go beyond the two quarterbacks, Hunter and Carter. I think it's a natural conclusion that they're approaching this process with an open mind. There are things to like and dislike about all four of these guys, but I feel like they want to present a front that they like them all. They'd be happy with all of them, and there's interest in all of them in case somebody wants to pick up that phone and call for a trade down.
I think that's the way to look at it. And I think Kenneth also has a great way of looking at it, in which he says, hilarious that everyone came away believing their choice was the correct one. A lot of confirmation bias taking place. I think so. You talk about the traits that, we'll get into some of this, like the different traits that these, Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi are looking for in a quarterback. And you can maybe make the assumption that, maybe they like Shedeur Sanders better. But then you also had them field questions about upside and a quarterback ceiling, or, how do you work through some of the flaws of quarterbacks? And they gave really insightful answers on those. And then you're like, but maybe they're leaning towards Cam Ward. And then you have how does Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter fit into all this? It's a jumbled mess that we can start to piece through here together.
Well, the best one I saw today, JT, was the big takeaway is that Borgonzi and Callahan are not on the same page because Brian sounds like he wants the quarterback and Borgonzi sounds like he wants either Carter or to trade back. So seeds of dysfunction in the Titans organization from day one in the combine.
Which is, I might add, the best time to have dysfunction, right?
Yeah.
Like keep your enemies guessing this time of year, because like we heard from them, and from Andrew Berry and from the Raiders group, from the Jets group, it is still so early. Like, even though people want to say, like, why haven't we heard anything about the 101 like getting moved or anything like that, right? Like David Brown says, that's exactly what the Titans organization wants people to think. It is way too early to be pinning this down to a couple different players right now. And I think, they're using this dysfunction to their advantage. And so Brinkerhead saying good cop, bad cop. Who's the good cop in this situation? Is it Brian? I feel like Brian is the good cop in this situation. I mean, look at this face. Well, I don't know.
That's what he wants us to think.
Yeah.
That's what he wants us to think, that he's the good cop. And he knows we'll automatically default to Borgonzi being the bad cop because of his Boston accent. We're like, our aversion for Northerners down here, we're going to be like, oh, he's definitely the bad cop. But really, Brian Callahan's the Joker. He's orchestrating the whole thing.
Yes, I love it. And we can get into some of these quotes here. Let's start with that idea that, Brian Callahan might be banging the drum for a quarterback versus Mike Borgonzi wanting to trade back or take a guy like Abdul Carter. And this was a question that was posed to Mike Borgonzi. Of course, he was with the Chiefs for a long, long time and saw the Chiefs 2 Super Bowl losses over the last, 5 years or so, in which they lost ultimately through the trenches. The Eagles defense was able to get after the quarterback against that Chiefs offensive line. And then, of course, in Patrick Mahomes' first Super Bowl appearance, or second, one of the two, one of his earliest Super Bowl appearances, that's how the Buccaneers were able to disrupt Patrick Mahomes as well. And so the question was posed, as much as you need a quarterback, we've seen even the best team over the past decade be able to be beatable because of building through the trenches. And here's what he had to say about this idea that even though they need a quarterback, they still really need to kind of get after the offensive and defensive line.
I mean, you can have Superman back there, and if you don't have the protection up front to protect, to be able to run the football, to be able to create balance in the game, that's the most important part, is building through the trenches. So offensive line, defensive line is going to be a big priority for us.
What do you weigh?
Yes, I mean, it's a big priority, and as Coach Will says here in the comment section, trenches are a top priority, but echoing deep edge class from both of them says a lot about Carter. I think that's a fair point to still see him at the top there, saying that he's one of the guys who we really maybe like. Maybe, there's a reason why he's being talked as one of the top prospects in this draft class. It would be very easy for them to also say, something along the lines of, but it's a deep class and we may need to look at other options. Like, that's something they could say, but it hasn't been said yet. And so I do think that his time in Kansas City has taught him a lot about how a team needs to be built. And from that answer alone, it makes sense as to why I think a guy like Mike Borgonzi would do well to make his first pick a home run pick in Abdul Carter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how angry this fan base is going to be if they go edge rusher and offensive tackle with the first 2 picks and just completely ignore the quarterbacks in this class, but I could see it being a prudent move for the long-term health of the franchise. You get a guy like Abdul Carter at 1 overall, you have to get him at 1 overall. There's not an offensive tackle that is the equivalent in his position group of Abdul Carter, but I think 35 is a nice little sweet spot for offensive tackle because of the way this draft has kind of shaped up in the offensive line group. I think you have a couple of big dominoes to fall between Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks. Do teams see them as guards? Do teams want to give them a shot at tackle? If so, like some of these guys like Josh Connerly, Josh Simmons with the medical issues could fall to 35. Ariante Ursary right there, Amon Membu out of Missouri. Like there's a really healthy middle class in this offensive tackle group where you might not have the Abdul Carter of the offensive tackles, but you've got a lot of guys in that late first, early second range that could end up being franchise right tackles for the Titans. And like I said, it's probably not going to be popular if they don't get a quarterback, but going with Abdul Carter and then getting your stud right tackle, that's pretty good team building from where I sit.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think that's where the conversation is going to go here. You know, you have the opportunity to take a guy like that at 1 and 2. But then again, those are positions of need, but how much does that factor in the importance of that need, right? The quarterback, I still believe, is above all else the position they have to figure out. And that is going to be, I think, where our show goes for the most of it, because there was a lot of quarterback talk and talking about guys that could potentially, you know, what traits are we looking for? What kind of system could we go with? The one thing that is certain with quarterbacks is that they will be bringing in more quarterbacks. Mike Borgonzi said that very sarcastically today, because he was like, well, yeah, Will Levis is the only one on the roster. Of course we have to bring in guys, but how they do that, I think, is going to be one of the more interesting, you know, the ways that we see this draft season and free agency unfold. Real quick before we get to the quarterback talk, one more thing about other positions that we heard from Mike Borgonzi and Brian Callahan today. If there was one thing I'm the most unsure of is, and I said this on Twitter earlier today, I am so unsure of how this team goes about addressing their need at wide receiver.
Yeah.
It today offered no solutions in my mind to how they look to, honestly, and maybe I said this on Friday, maybe I said this in a group chat or to the side in passing someday, but right now it's hard to not feel like the Titans may have the worst wide receiver room in the league. And I don't think that's, I really don't think that's a hot take, considering the next best guy behind Calvin Ridley right now is Colton. No, not Colton. Bryce Oliver, Treylon Burks. Like, you have Treylon Burks, Bryce Oliver, Jaquan Jackson, Colton Dowell, Mason Kinsey, and Ronnie Stanley under contract. Like, that is along with Calvin Ridley.
If they had Ronnie Stanley under contract,
not Ronnie. What's his name?
Put him out there at right tackle.
Stanley Morgan. Right. There you go. I can't even remember his name. Like, those are the guys they have under contract. And it feels like, with how much they have to fix the need at quarterback, the right side of the line, all these different things, we've lost sight of, okay, you can get a quarterback, but who is he going to throw to right now? And you start to think about the potential ways they could look into free agency with a lot of big veteran names. You look at the draft, and then you hear Mike Borgonzi talk about the positions that are super deep this year. He talks about edge. He talks about D-line. Talks about running back. Talks about tight end. There's no mention of wide receiver.
It's a weird class.
It is a weird class. And then when talking about free agency, they talk about how they're going to be selective in their free agency. And selective, he kind of was able to define a little bit more, saying we are going to be disciplined in our attack of free agency. We have a couple guys that we really, really like, but if things don't go our way, we're not going to pivot. We're going to stick to our guns, which, to be honest, sounds like a complete 180 in philosophy from last year with Rand Carthon and that situation, does it not?
Yeah, I mean, that was the famous story, was that they had this money that they wanted to re-sign Azeez Al-Shire and Danico Autry with. Those guys ended up on their way to Houston, and the idea was that they just pivoted and said, we'll just give that money to Calvin Ridley instead.
Yeah, and so we asked Mike Borgonzi about bringing back a guy potentially like NWI, or how do you look to address this need at wide receiver? And here was his response.
Had more people there, and Nick did a great job, in prior years here with the team. So we're going through that evaluation period now, whether that's free agency or the draft, trying to fill those voids. But we certainly need to add players in that room.
That's all he really said. We have to add players to that room. What those players look like, I still don't know. I like the idea. I'm a believer of Drew saying here, Pat Bryant, a Tutu Atwell, and a Ridley, or David saying Ridley, Elijah Moore, and Matthew Golden. I think one way or the other, in my mind, the thing that was confirmed to me about wide receiver, and you might disagree with this, that their first pick in the 4th round already has wide receiver written all over it.
Absolutely.
The best available wide receiver at the start of day 3 is going to be a Titan. Like, I think that's the spot. And I know people are saying, maybe Matthew Golden at 35. Listen, Eddie, if Luther Burden was there and he's somehow there at 35, you run that ticket up. And I know it's maybe a little contentious, but as Eddie's saying, no wide receiver till day 3 is his personal hell. But like, this is the front office. This is the front office that kind of subscribes to the idea that we are not going to go out and spend on free agent wide receivers, and we're not going to spend big time draft capital on wide receivers. And so it'll be very interesting to see what they do this offseason and in free agency.
Yeah, I do want to clarify, because Brinkerhead Snake asked us, so Ridley was a bad signing. That is not what I meant to imply. I actually liked Calvin Ridley once they figured out how to get him the ball and used him effectively. I'm just saying the idea was that maybe it wasn't the most prudent signing from a financial standpoint, and maybe it was a sense of abandoning the plan to go get the playmaker when maybe they should have pumped the brakes a little bit. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree with you there. Listen, that's one I just don't know if we aren't and yeah, Chiefs and Packers wide receivers historically aren't world beaters. They churn guys who are value. You see it with the Chiefs. You saw it with the Packers in drafting Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Christian Watson in the 2nd and 3rd rounds. Like, that's where you're starting to see these guys. And I agree with Drew here. Jalen Knoll, Pat Bryant, Ty Felton, guys who I think they should absolutely be in on day 3.
I like Ty Felton. I haven't gotten anywhere with Pat Bryant, and his best games come against weaker opponents. So maybe I've watched too many of his games against, like, Oregon and the world beaters of the Big Ten. Maybe I need to watch him beat up on Wisconsin or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think he has really good hands. That's the thing I come back to. I don't know about him as a route runner, but like, if you need a guy to go up there and catch a ball, especially specifically when, looking at contested catches, like Pat Bryant is your guy. But
Tutu Atwell and free agency. We're starting the train. Drew, yes. Hop on. We got it.
I agree. I bought my ticket a long time ago on that idea, but here's the thing. It's day 1 of the combine, and we're talking about Pat Bryant and Tutu Atwell. There are more important things to talk about here, which we will get into now, which is the quarterback, which we're going to spend the rest of the show talking about, because outside of, well, I guess we can talk about Travis Hunter as well here, but outside of thoughts on Abdul Carter and what they really are going to do at the wide receiver position, the rest of the time spent today was quarterback. And we're going to go through a lot of these clips here. And I think a lot of us can come to the same conclusion that Kenneth came to, that it feels like these two guys, in Mike Borgonzi and Brian Callahan, were sort of contradicting each other on purpose, I think. And so, but I do think there's also some really valuable information that we heard from them today. And so I think the first thing we can start off with here is the interview process, because there's been a lot of talk about how important really are the interviews this time of year. Like, the tape is the tape, of course, but what do you gain from the interview portion? And I think what we saw today, and what I heard personally, was, and you can disagree with me, Stoney, if you don't think this way as well, the Titans are using these interviews to be more about confirmation than it really is discovery, in my opinion. We got we got a lot of talk about how the tape is the tape, and we use these to bring them in and confirm whether or not, that is what we're seeing on tape. That is what we're hearing. That's what scouts are hearing from talking to coaches and things like that. But I do think if there is one way that it can be about discovery, it's how Mike Borgonzi talked about some of these interviews. And when you listen to this clip about, what part of the interview can serve as, I think you can start to make some connections on how they might use them effectively to find out more things about, say, a Cam Ward. Here's what Mike Borgonzi had to say.
So when we're doing these interviews, we're really trying to drill down on the tape a little bit, so the coaches are in there as well. So if there's any questions that we might have on the football intelligence piece, the coaches are making cut-ups of that film. So you get a good feel, even though it's 18 minutes, you get a good feel of kind of what their foundation is in terms of knowledge of, either the offense or the defense.
Last week.
So that's, I think, really interesting that it sounds like, specifically for these quarterbacks as well, getting that confirmation of the ability to see the tape and I guess, for lack of a better term, their ball knowledge is what you're seeing on tape. And I think that's a big thing for a guy like Cam Ward, who, some of the knocks on him is that he plays better out of structure than maybe he does in structure. How big could that flip the script for Cam Ward if he goes into an interview like that and really wows the coaches with his ability to dissect plays and maybe see what he could have done different, or, show the ability to see how he could play on structure. I think that is, if there was one player that could kind of use the interviews to their advantage this week, it's Cam Ward going in there and showing that he can play in structure and can play on time and can do the things that maybe Shedeur Sanders has a leg up on him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a crucial part of the process where the tape study has been done. Naturally, you watch the tape, questions arise out of that. I mean, if you guys listen to me for very long talking about a prospect, I'm asking questions to nobody because I don't get to sit down with these players or anything like that. But I'll be talking to you or Zach or whoever and be like, yeah, I wonder why he made this throw. I wonder if this was designed or if he saw something particular that made him think that this was a good decision or something like that. Gives you the opportunity to do that. And for a guy like Cam Ward, I watch him and I think I think a lot of the structure stuff is a little overblown, but my issue is more with the recklessness and his willingness to just throw into whatever coverage is downfield. Sit him down. Say, hey, why did you make this throw? Was this something did the coach have, a gun to your head telling you you've got to throw this ball no matter what? Or did you see something in this coverage that made you think that this was a safer throw than it actually was? And I'm not just bashing Cam Ward either. For Shedeur, it's like you pop on the tape and you're like, why didn't you bail from this pocket sooner? What's going on here? What did you not see the edge rusher coming? Did you not see the pocket collapsing? Did you not feel it? That sort of thing. You can iron out some of those deficiencies that you see from the tape. And from there, you do kind of build your case for or against a prospect. You're either satisfied with the answer or you're not. And this is your first chance to really get to do it. Getting a feel for the player also kind of helps you determine, okay, do we want to bring this guy in for a 30 visit and get a deeper look at him, have a deeper conversation with him, that sort of thing. So this is really like just the latest checkpoint on the grand journey to the NFL draft.
Yeah, I agree with you there. As Eddie says, it's just a whole bunch of, hey, man, why'd you throw that?
That's what I'm saying. 18 minutes of why'd you throw this ball?
It could be, but, and Kenneth with a point where he says, I know it sounds like bias from him, but to him, it sounds like the coach staff want to love him, being Ward, I'm assuming, but need confirmation on him. I'd argue that they just need the chance to. I don't think we've heard a lot of strong feelings about Ward, because this staff as a whole has not gotten to meet with him. We heard that from Mike Borgonzi today, that this staff, this will be the first time that they are collectively able to be together and meet Cam Ward for the first time. Now, will that change the public the public appearance of a guy like Cam Ward? Maybe. But like, I do think, to Cam Ward's credit, and did I just say that? That's crazy. To his credit, like, he may have not have been given the best chance yet, in the eye of public opinion with the team and what we've heard. So I think that's really interesting to see here. Easton saying, what ballroom are we in again? I forgot. If you guys want to know, at the Indiana Convention Center, the media workroom is in a ballroom called Sagamore. You can see the connection where we're going from there. There was quite a few jokes that were made today about that ballroom. Good, this is a good spot to take a breath and thank our wonderful and amazing sponsors, ML Rose Craft Beer and Burgers, 7 locations in the greater Nashville area, with an 8th on the way in East Nashville. Got to get out to ML Rose. Man, I was talking to Jim Wyatt today, and he saw my hat, and he was like, ML Rose, I love that place. And I was like, I do too. And you know what, Jim? I kind of hate being here because the food in Indianapolis, not saying that there's really good food, but like, if I want a burger, there's no ML Rose here in Indianapolis, man. I don't think. And that makes me miss it so much more. I mean, why, look at Brian Callahan. When Brian Callahan sees ML Rose, this is the kind of smile and face that you see when you're thinking about going to ML Rose. Over 25 beers on tap, an absolutely insane menu, starting with their starters to their sandwiches, and of course the craft burgers. Stoney, you said you got to get out there. You only have 3-4 more days to try the burger of the month, the El Jefe burger. Like, time is running out, man.
If I don't go Friday, I'm cooked.
I know. And it sounds like you're going to have to overrule date night on Friday to make sure that it is at ML Rose. Thank you to them for sponsoring the show. Also give a shout out to Sinkers Beverages for sponsoring the show as well. Check them out and shop over at sinkersbeverages.com. And when you do that, join the in crowd over there for special benefits, allocations, and bi-weekly tastings. Anyways, that should end up sealing it here. But Logan says Frank Gore wouldn't apply to that ballroom. Thanks. I appreciate it. Anyways, let's get into the gaslighting of Cam Ward versus Shedeur Sanders here. That's been a lot of the conversation today. Here's the big one, right? The biggest thing that we need to find out from these from Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi today specifically was, what are the qualities they're looking for with some of these quarterbacks? Trying to get a better idea of, the things that matter to them the most. And it's really black and white when you start to hear, like, when you hear them talk about one kind of trait or intangible of a quarterback, you can kind of instantly connect it to one quarterback or the other, vice versa. And we can start with Mike Borgonzi when he was asked, what is the number one trait that you're looking for in some of these quarterbacks at the draft this year? Here's what he had to say.
To me, I think it's the processing. Can they process coverages in the defense? They come in all shapes and sizes, big arm talent, average arm strength. And some guys are successful, with our average arm strength. But I really think it comes down to, can you process things quickly and fast? Yeah, I got to cut him.
Yeah, so, processing certainly sounds like a point in Shedeur Sanders' favor. You talk about the things that the qualities that Brian Callahan is looking for in a quarterback. This is what he had to say about those type of intangibles that he's looking for, as well as how difficult it can be to kind of scout some of these quarterback prospects. Here's what he had to say.
It's one of those qualities, those three: decision making, timing, accuracy. In scouting quarterbacks is not an exact science. You could see over the years that there's been really quality players that you think had it that maybe didn't show up when it actually came time, and then there's ones that you weren't sure if they did and they show up and they play well. So yeah, those are things that we have to do our due diligence on and make sure that we're trying to unturn all the stones from the tape, from the person, from the workouts. All that stuff is a part of the process to try to make the best decision we can when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks in general.
So once again, the processing, the timing, the accuracy. Feels like things, at least 2 or 3 of those go in the favor. Even there's an argument to say all 3 go in the favor of Shedeur Sanders. But the one big one, and I think I wonder if it was Logan in the chat here who said, I wonder if they're going to mention arm strength. And oh boy, was arm strength mentioned quite a few times today, and not a lot by me. So like I feel like vindicated in my crusade to talk about maybe arm strength not being all that we make it to be. Like it's overrated, maybe even not necessary at this point in the NFL. That's a take that I will continue to bang the drum on and debate a wall. However, we did hear from Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi about the idea of how much arm strength really matters. Is it more important than some of these processing things? Is it the one trait that you want to look at in a quarterback when really trying to study them? And here's what Brian Callahan had to say about arm strength.
I think that there's a requisite arm strength, right? You have to be able to make a certain amount of throws down the field, outside the numbers, tight windows, those things. But then the other part of it is the ability to anticipate and to make the decision that puts the ball in the right window. Those things all matter. So again, you don't have to have the strongest arm in the entire draft, but there's a threshold. There's a minimum requisite, I think, is the best way to put it. But the rest of that stuff matters, I think, just as much. Your ability to anticipate, to throw on time, and to throw accurately, and you mix that with the arm strength portion. So there's a lot of different ways it looks. There's a lot of different ways quarterbacks can play. So I hesitate to fit one bucket is more important than the other, but the whole picture has to fit.
So, yes, and the bottom line, does arm strength probably matter a little bit? Like, yes, and Drew says it's my woke agenda. There's a lot of different opinions. I did say it doesn't matter. Maybe I might be wrong about that, but like I said, debate a wall. I don't really care. Logan saying it's the best take I've ever had, which maybe that's thank you. Kenneth saying, did somebody make fun of how far you threw a football, JT, in a flag football game? Don't die on this hill over a bully. It's not about it like being a Cam Ward versus Shedeur Sanders thing. To me, it's not about the arm strength at all. Like he said, the ability to process, I think, gets so underrated in this talk about arm strength. And we heard from QB coach Sean McAvoy, who we had on 2 weeks ago. And I implore people to go back and listen to our conversation about arm strength, because I thought he said it really best. Like, can arm strength help you in certain situations? Yes. Like if you are Cam Ward and you have a stronger arm, like you have the luxury of being able to take that extra half a second to second to process. And that arm strength is going to get you there. But if you're a guy like Shedeur, who is already one of the best, most accurate processors and guy who's going to see the field and anticipate like he's been made out to be, then it doesn't really matter, because, if he really is that good at anticipating and processing, much like a guy like Joe Burrow, and I'm not saying Shedeur Sanders is Joe Burrow, but Joe Burrow is able to do that and get away with not having the strongest arm because of how good of a processor and anticipator he is. And so, yes, it helps Cam Ward, but it doesn't. The bottom line, I don't think it hurts Shedeur, and I think that's that's kind of what I thought Brian Callahan had to say on that idea. Yes, of course you need enough arm strength to make the throws that you need to make, but it's not a hindrance to, I think, Shedeur Sanders' game that he doesn't have the same, arm strength, ability to throw it 90 yards downfield. Does that make sense, Stoney?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at just life in the NFL right now, how many 50-yard bombs are teams taking in every game? It's only a handful, if any. You listen to the way Brian,
for one game with Will Levis against the Atlanta Falcons. But
well, touche. Yeah, I think that was more about Will Levis than the requisite arm strength of the average NFL quarterback. But I digress. I think especially when you hear Brian Callahan talk about what he wants his offense to be, and this is something that he talked about even before last season started, but short, quick game, intermediate passing, accuracy, completion percentage, that sort of thing. You watch the design of a lot of these plays, it's about moving the chains, efficiency, being on time, chewing up clock, running the football, and taking your deep shots when they present themselves. It doesn't sound to me like it's a priority. Now, it's awesome when we get a fireworks show and Calvin Ridley hits for a 60-yard touchdown, but I don't think that's the intent, the function of the offense. If you got a guy that can go out there and make the important throws, read quickly, process what the defense is doing, and deliver the throws accurately, like that is the most important quality for a quarterback to have. Not just I'm trying to avoid saying in Brian Callahan's scheme, because he also talked today about talent over scheme, like things are going to be tweaked, but from a philosophical standpoint, that's what he wants. That's what he believes translates to success in the NFL, and that's what he wants in a quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And so, you do have to have the arm strength to an extent, and it has to meet that required threshold to operate an offense like Brian Callahan's. Now, people love to disagree on how much that arm strength really is around. Certainly, when we ask a guy like Mike Borgonzi, here's what he had to say about arm strength, and more specifically, the arm strength of Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly been quarterback. To answer your question about Shedeur, I think he has plenty of arm strength. Okay. In some of the anticipatory throws sometimes make up for the lack of arm strength. Right. And certainly we've seen quarterbacks over the years that are able to do that because they anticipate better. And a lot of that has to do with field instincts too. If a player has a really good field vision and instincts and have a feel for it to anticipate some of those throws, there's been successful quarterbacks that really haven't had great arm talent that have played in the league.
So that's yeah, and so now, bottom line, and we'll get to this in a second, I think we can, even though it may be another point in Shedeur Sanders' favor, is it lying season? Like, is this just blowing smoke? As bringing up the picture again, lying, giddy Brian Callahan. Like, is it lying? Maybe. Like, yeah. I think that still is very much in play, but that's something I feel like when looking at the tape, anybody can see that, that certain threshold. That's not a thing that you can lie about and hold behind closed doors. I feel like that's pretty open for everyone to see. And so with that, it seems like a lot of the things that they said about the qualities of the quarterbacks they want, or like the intangibles or the talent, a lot of those traits seem to be moving towards Shedeur Sanders. And so after all these clips we play, it's easy to make the conclusion that it feels like Shedeur is their guy. However, you hear this next clip from Brian Callahan talking about, the difference between working with some of the flaws of a quarterback versus the I can fix him mentality. And some of the things he says, when this question is also likened to what Borgonzi and the Chiefs did in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes, you start to hear this argument and insight about what they could do with a guy like Cam Ward. And here's what he had to say. It's a little bit of a longer answer, but I think this was maybe one of the most insightful and best answers of the day.
I'm very careful with being able to proclaim you can fix something. There's definitely things you can improve that are coachable, that are quote unquote fixable. But you also got to be very mindful of what it is you're thinking you can fix. And I think you have to guard against that as a coach, because as a coach, you're always very confident, I can fix that. And sometimes you can't, and that's okay. You can't fix every issue every player has, but are they things you can work with? Whatever it is you think you can fix, can you deal with it if you can't fix it to the way you need to? So that's a tricky proposition when you're talking about fixing players. I think that you got to guard against the overconfidence that a coach can have sometimes. You have to be able to be honest about what is a actual fixable trait or technique, or is it just how they play the game? And then The flip side of that is for a guy like, using Mahomes as an example, you don't want to take away what's special about him, whereas some things you would look at him coming out of college and you'd be like, man, we got to fix that. But it ultimately ends up being what's one of his superpowers as a quarterback is the ability to create and do things off the structure that when you watch him on tape in college, you're like, man, how do you rein that in? And the answer is you don't want to. I think when you watch how he's played over his career. So I think every situation is different. It's individualistic for each player. But I'm always very, very careful of saying you can fix particular things.
An answer that seems to say that we think, that you don't want to take away the bad superhero plays of a guy like Cam Ward, but you can manage those things. And so all of these questions come back to the contradictory nature of what this is, which is lying season. Who's right? Who's wrong? I think it gets back to my ultimate point earlier in the show at the beginning, where I said, I still don't think this team has made up their mind. Now, could they have? And this is a tactical, plan being in place, maybe. But I would like to think that with these answers, a lot of this insight I do think is truthful. And with that, it is contradicting reports that say the process is still very, very early on. We are still very early in this process. By no means has anybody made up their mind on what the Titans may do at 101 or potentially trading back or taking an Abdul Carter or anything like that. And so I think that's where I stand on the matter, Stoney.
Yeah, I think it's funny because we're sitting here talking about them, lying season, smoke screen season. I called Brian Callahan the Joker earlier in this episode. By the way, great hair day for Brian Callahan.
It was.
Today. It was on point. I'm kind of envious of that because I got a bad haircut a few weeks ago and I'm struggling. I'm just judging everybody's
good.
hair.
Oh, come on.
Anyway, I digress.
The Senior Bowl cut?
The Senior Bowl cut. It sucks, man. It's getting too long. It's weird. I look like Stewart from Mad TV whenever I get out of the shower. Nonetheless, I think it's also possible. We're talking about it like, oh, wow, they're just scheming. But it could also indicate that they're just not set on any of these four guys. And there are things that they like and they dislike about each of them. And they're being honest and communicating that right now because the process is still very much fluid. There's still plenty of time for things to develop, for their opinions on these guys to harden, so to speak, before they make up their mind. So we could just be still early enough in the process that it is just authentic and honest opinions and analysis from Mike Borgonzi and Brian Callahan.
Yeah, I agree with you there. A couple more things before we get out of here and look at some of your comments. We talked all about these rookie quarterbacks, but that doesn't mean that taking one of these rookie quarterbacks would take the Titans out of the market on a veteran option here.
Sure.
Mike Borgonzi, I think, had a really good answer today about the potential of bringing in a veteran quarterback and taking a quarterback still in this draft, something that I think they do need to stay, even if they don't believe it. Like you aren't saying that we're not going to take a quarterback in free agency, or we, are definitely taking a quarterback in free agency. You want to keep your options open because of how that kind of cuts your options almost in half based on free agency just coming before the draft. Here's what Mike Borgonzi said about the possibility of bringing in a veteran guy from the free agent market, but also still taking a quarterback in the draft.
The places I've been, we've always had older quarterbacks kind of mentor the younger quarterback. It's almost like another coach in the room for them, just to kind of show them how to be a pro, teach them all the little things about protection and just how to study opponents. That would probably be a priority for us if we did end up drafting a quarterback.
Yeah, so it does sound like either way, obviously it's a need. You need more than one quarterback. You need more than two quarterbacks on a roster. And two, it would be the smart thing, as Team Ramrod says here. Mike Borgonzi, a.k.a. the Cyborg, just told Rappaport that if they do trade the pick, it won't happen anytime soon. I agree with that. You heard from teams like the Browns and the Raiders. And Paul Koharski told me that he asked, who was it, Pete Carroll, about the possibility of trading, and Pete Carroll just laughed at the podium today. Like not on a lot of GM and head coach's mind right now. This week is, maybe it is tonight, but during the daylight hours, it is definitely not about trading the first overall pick. Stoney, yes.
We still got 2 months to go, man.
We
There's
do,
a
yes.
lot of time before the draft.
Yes, very true. Last thing we'll get to here before we get to some of your comments. Travis Hunter, corner, wide receiver. What do the Titans think? Obviously, he could still be in play, even though I think it's less likely, just given the need, and what we've heard about Travis Hunter. Here's what Brian Callahan had to say about Travis Hunter and if he would be able to play both positions at, a star level in the NFL. Here's what he had to say.
A good deal, I guess, my Jesus.
Yeah, it's very realistic. I think he's a unique player that there's not a whole lot of other players you could compare what he's done. There's not many guys that have played that many snaps on both sides of the ball. And you watch his tape and you see his ability to play both at a very high level. So, I think anybody that you talk to about him is going to say the same thing, that he's got the ability to play both. And then I think you're going to find out where he fits if you were to get him. But he's got a really unique ability to do a lot of different things.
So he goes on to say after that one, if you had to say where he would play primarily, Brian Callahan did say explicitly that he believes Travis Hunter would play at corner and then find his way into the offense eventually. So it sounds like, and this has been a big debate because it wasn't set in stone. I know the Browns GM said that he would prefer him at wide receiver to start. So it's not an open and shut case on the Travis Hunter. And so I do think that is an interesting one. Anything else, Stoney, that you found rather interesting today from the Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi player availability? Besides Mike Vrabel getting a new haircut, but we don't have to spend time on that. So.
Oh, I didn't even catch that. Mike Vrabel didn't cross my my timeline today.
I don't think he did either on mine.
Interesting. So. Yeah. Wow.
City boys, we up.
Are we finally moving on? Is this it?
Maybe.
We're finally moving on. Okay. I wanted to ask, to clarify his response, was he asked specifically about Travis Hunter with the Titans?
No, he was just asked, do you think that he would play corner or wide receiver?
Okay. Well, and I think that's, parroting a lot of what's out there right now. Probably going to play corner first, maybe some packages at wide receiver. I still don't see Travis Hunter being a cornerback in Denard Wilson's defense the way that we've seen it played so far. I think it would take a little bit of a scheme change. It's not about technical deficiencies. I think Travis Hunter is capable of playing more press man. I just don't think he has the aggression, the physicality that they want out of a cornerback. But brother, you need dudes on offense. We just went over this wide receiving room not too long ago. Travis Hunter is a guy, you just want to feed him. You want to get the ball in his hand, let him jump cut somebody into another dimension and accelerate, hit that second gear off to the races. I mean, him and Ridley, with the versatility of what they can do from an alignment standpoint with both of those guys, the plays they can run where, again, you don't need them to get 50 yards downfield and then throw a bomb to them. You just need to get them 5 yards upfield, get the ball in their hands, and let them make some magic happen. That is an enticing proposition. That is exciting to think about. So for me, I do lean on it being more of a particular situation fit than we're just gonna force him to play cornerback. I think if the Titans took Travis Hunter, I would be okay with that, under the presumption that he's going to be a wide receiver first in this offense, and then he can be a contingency plan, because we've talked about the age and the uncertainty and the injury history of where the Titans are at cornerback right now. So if they need a corner on down the line, maybe you flip Travis Hunter. But for now, let's get some juice in that passing game, buddy.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Stoney, let's go through some of these comments before we get out of here. Logan saying Easton said his RAS would be higher than the Hot Read podcast combined. There's just no way. I run a faster 40. I think I could beat him at most any combine drill. Like I think my vert is better than his too. So
this is where my age comes into play, because I've put on a lot of weight since my heyday, my prime. If I was in my prime, I have no confidence saying I would smoke Easton in the combine drills. I do.
Love it.
I ran a 4.9 in college in 2007. I ran a 4.9. I got it under 5.
Love it. Coach Wills, I think, brings up an interesting one, which we'll talk about a lot. Dynamic tight end at 35. Like, I don't hate it. Like, if
don't hate it either.
You tell me you get Elijah Arroyo in this building, like I'm on board at 35. It'd be they'd probably take like a tight end at 35 and then take a running back at 118, and Nashville would burn. But I'd be pretty happy. I'd be very happy. I mean, with that,
it's not a premium position. So I haven't heard. I don't know who has their fingers on the pulse of this tight end class. We just assume that because Tyler Warren is a top 10 talent in this class, he's going to be a top 10 pick. But, it doesn't seem to happen as frequently anymore as it used to. So what happens if Tyler Warren slides, into the 20s or something like that? Does a guy like Colston Loveland end up being there at 35 because the value of the pick? I don't know. If the NFL says, hey, we don't want to miss out on this loaded running back class, and there's a run of like 4 running backs that end up going in the first round, which sounds crazy. But if you read the reports on guys like Ashton Genty, Caleb Johnson, Amarian Hampton, Travion Henderson, there's a bunch of guys that, like, if they're all first round picks, there's going to be a run there and somebody's going to get pushed down the line. Could it be the tight ends? And could they end up with somebody really good there at 35? I think it's a possibility. And I don't know. It's kind of fun to think about.
Yeah. And David says no wide receiver at 35, but tight end. Like, I'd argue that some of these tight ends are better route runners and better receiving options than a lot of the tight end or a lot of the wide receiver group. Like Mason Taylor, Elijah Arroyo, Gunnar Helm, I think can be up there with this wide receiver class. So that's one I think that is really interesting. I
want the kid out of UCLA that's built like a Minecraft character. Like, dude, it's like, he looks like a statue moving out there, but then somehow, like, he gets the separation that it takes at the catch point to make the catch because nobody can slow him down. Nobody can bring him down. He's just like a slab of granite out there moving around on the field.
If he is a Minecraft character, Fannin Jr. is the skeleton from Minecraft.
I like that.
That's what I think here. We'll also leave on these like 4th round wide receivers. Like, I think that's where you specifically this year you find that like late day 2, early day 3 guy like a Jaden Reed in this class. But like that also being said, as David says here, like safety, middle linebacker, guard, like there's going to be a lot of good options here this year in that 4th. So it'll be really interesting what they do. Just like Jason says, let's talk about wide receiver like we do quarterback. The wide receiver class looks better next year. All the more reason to go get more picks for next year and just kind of sail this ship down the road. And then also, yes, this is some interesting news, like for draft people. The Mike Green situation has seemingly, as we've talked about for a little bit, has finally come out. Is this another one where, listen, if we're going to do the Tavontre Sweat thing over again to get the same good player, like, I don't want to get too much into it, but like also it would be sweet to see Mike Green like on this team just from a talent. Now, will the interviews and will the character concerns kind of lie down after interviews this week? I think that's something that we are really going to have to find out. And that's what makes the rest of this week so important. We get to talk to guys like Mike Green, Abdul Carter, all the defensive edges tackles and safety, or I guess maybe safeties or cornerbacks. I don't remember exactly the schedule, but that is what we get to do tomorrow. And for the rest of the week, we have so much content coming to you this week from the Combine. Stoney, gonna be an awesome week. Cannot wait to finally dig in on a lot of these prospects. Give the people what they want. Talk about 4th round tackles on Friday, like all day long we can, because that's when we'll be able to talk to them and things like that. It's going to be so much fun. But that's gonna do it for the Hot Read podcast today. Do you have one more thing, Stoney?
If I may, JT,
okay.
I don't want to comment on the Mike Green situation because it's obviously a very serious situation, not to be taken lightly or anything. But from what I have heard, I do wonder how NFL teams will look at the situation. Obviously, got to get all of the details, all of the information themselves and evaluate it. But I do kind of feel like if what I've heard about the situation is true, I don't know that he's going to be falling too far, if that makes sense.
That's fair enough to say.
Leave it at that. Did I do a good enough job qualifying that?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
And we'll be able to talk about it more tomorrow when we get to talk to him once again in person. Here's so much more from in and around the Combine here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Cannot wait for, once again, back at around the same time tomorrow. Stoney, I don't know if you'll be here with us, but we will be I will be doing a show here in Indianapolis because the content machine continues to roll on for the rest of the week. Cannot wait to see what we hear at the Indiana Convention Center tomorrow. Thank you to our wonderful sponsors, ML Rose and Sinkers Beverages, as always. And until tomorrow, this has been the Hot Read Podcast. We will talk to you then.